Most high performers exist at 60% capacity while they feel maxed out. And that untapped 40%, like that's where the fulfillment lives. And I've spent 10 plus years in the trenches of success, building and selling businesses. I've coached 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs, and I know the success paradox battle intimately because I've lived it. So in the next few minutes, I want to show you 2 things. The first is I want to show you 2 traps that keep you stuck at 60%. And then the second is I want to teach you about the ultimate standard approach. This is the thing, the 3-step process that closes that gap. And it's important to understand, I'm not just talking about theory here. This is the exact framework that's transformed hundreds of successful but unfulfilled men's lives. Now, I want you to ask yourself this question. When was the last time an achievement actually satisfied you for longer than a week? Because if you can't remember, you're not alone. This is the 60% trap that shows up in many men's lives. And there are 2 specific patterns that cause this. The first is what I call the achievement treadmill. And what I found is that every win you get gives you a hit of dopamine, but it disappears faster than it came. And so you chase the next one and the next one. And so there's years of work, you cross the finish lines, you close the big deals, but you feel nothing. And here's the revelation that nobody's talking about. The more successful you become, the shorter your dopamine hits are. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about here. Like, it takes more and more effort to get the experience that you desire, to get that feeling of the bigger deals. You need more money, you need a bigger race, you need to perform better, you need to be up on the podium every single time. Otherwise, you feel unfulfilled. And so we just keep moving the goalposts and we're never truly at the fulfillment that we desire to have. And then the second is the busy but empty life paradox. Like, this is where you're working 80-hour weeks, you're in constant motion, you're always on. Now, you're probably efficient at the tasks, but they're tasks that don't matter, right? You've probably got the full calendar. You're probably super fast at responding on emails, etc. But you gotta ask yourself the question, why? Like, what's all that for? And so you've mastered going nowhere fast, and you've confused busyness for impact. And what this does is it leads to a life that happens all around you, but it doesn't happen through you. And so you're physically present, but you're mentally absent. So let me guess, like, your mind is constantly racing. Like, it's always thinking about the things that need to be done. Like, when you're watching your kids at sport, you're figuring out how to close the next big deal. Or when you're on date night, the mind's wandering off, rehearsing the next business meeting. Now, I share that because that's where I was. That's where I got stuck. And the thing is, you probably can't even remember what you did last Tuesday despite being a productive day. And it's important to understand here that what I'm talking about, what I'm referring to, like, this isn't a time management problem. It's not going to be solved by being more productive. It's about presence. And so here's what no one tells you. That missing 40% isn't achieved by working harder. It's about discipline. It's about clarity. It's about internal structure. And without these 3 elements, like, you continue just spinning on the achievement treadmill while feeling empty inside. And I remember one of the brothers that came into Rising King, Steve. Like, this guy had built an $8.2 million business over the last 15 years, but he was living on caffeine. He was sleeping maybe 5 hours a night. He had no real connection with his wife. And he continually was chasing the big thing. Actually, in one of the conversations, I asked him, I'm like, what's the goal, man? What's the end game? And he told me he wants to get to $600 million. And I'm like, where in this journey between 0 and $8.2 million have you ever felt successful or happy or fulfilled? And his answer was never. Like, it was just never enough until he got to the $600 million mark. And so this is where our work started. And 18 months later of working together, going through the Rising King's processes, building out the discipline, helping him get clear across the domains, he actually ended up selling the business for over 8 figures and then described himself as actually living, not just existing. And this is what happens when you slow down in order to speed up. This is when you get clear. This is what happens when you put in the time to actually understand what has to be fixed in order to create the fulfilling life, not just successful. And so I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you felt completely whole, not just success on paper? Because here's the thing, most men waste decades perfecting a game that can't actually be won. And there are 3 very common truths that you must understand that are going to change everything for you. The first is this, is that money doesn't create fulfillment. And I'm sure you've heard that before. But did you know there was a research study done around this where 73% of wealthy individuals reported the same stress levels they had before wealth. That's 7 out of 10 high achievers walking around feeling like frauds despite their success. And then the second is that physical perfection, that's a mirage, man. Like 52% of elite athletes, people with the dream physiques, they battle depression and anxiety. Why? Because the mirror can't fix what's happening inside. It's not an external problem that needs to be fixed here. And then the third is this, is that achievement alone is hollow. 68% of achievers feel like frauds after major wins. And I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. You get a big win, whether that's in business, maybe that's in sport, maybe that's something else in life. But when you do it and you get the accolades and you get the trophies, there's still that voice inside saying, you could have done better. And that's because fulfillment isn't something you chase. It's what happens when you stop chasing and start operating differently. And fulfillment has what I would call a physical sensation. It's the deep breath, man, after a challenging workout. It's that clarity after a tough decision. It's the warmth that you get when you're fully present with your family and those that you love. Now, it's important to understand, not everyone feels fulfilled 24/7. Life is going to cycle between the challenges and ease. The difference, however, is that the average man gets stuck in cycles, right? Men who operate at their highest standard, though, they use both as fuel. And this is what I call the ultimate standard approach. And if you take my client Ryan, for example, he's a 7-figure finance broker who went from 70-hour work weeks to 45 productive hours. And through that, he was able to achieve better outcomes, not only in his business, but reclaiming his health, connection with his family, and he did all this in just 90 days. And his transformation began in my bootcamp environment. Like, this is where we methodically built discipline, the clarity, the structure together that gave him the principles that he started applying to his life. Because when you apply this approach I'm about to teach you, your business becomes more profitable, your body becomes stronger, your relationships deepen, your purpose and your clarity get sharper. Because what you need to understand is that the gap isn't about information. The truth is, man, you already know what to do. It's about implementation through the discipline, through the structure and the systems that need to be put in place. And so, like I mentioned at the start of the video, here's the 3 powerful steps that's helped hundreds of men close that 40% fulfillment gap. The first is you need to define your actual targets. And so a great way to do that is to ask yourself the following question. If you achieved everything you're working for, would you actually feel different? Or would you just set a higher, bigger target? Now, for most, it's the latter. We would just set a bigger target. That's why we're here. That's why I'm watching this video. That's what I'm looking for. I'm seeking this higher level of fulfillment. And so to get the clarity in terms of defining your actual targets, here are the 4 questions you need to ask. What does success look like in each of these following 4 domains? The first is business. What outcomes actually matter beyond revenue for you? The next is your body. Like, how do you want to feel physically? The third is your relationships. Like, what quality of connection do you want? And then finally is around yourself. Like, what standards will you uphold regardless of the challenges when they hit? And when you go through this process, it creates the clarity that's been missing for most. And then the next step, step 2, is to identify what I call your alive triggers. This isn't when you're successful. This is when you felt alive. And so I want you to write down 10 moments when you felt most alive. And then I want you looking for patterns, because these patterns are going to help you unlock where fulfillment lies. Like, were you being challenged? Were you connecting deeply with others? Were you creating something meaningful? Were you physically pushing your limits? And this helps you start to understand when you're in flow and when you're going to feel more fulfilled. And then the third step is to create your integrated standards map. Because if you stopped accepting good enough in every domain, how would your life change? Now, for each of the domains we discussed in step 1 and step 2, I want you to define the following. What are your non-negotiable daily practices? What are your weekly review metrics? What are the standards you will uphold even when inconvenient? And lastly, what are the boundaries you'll maintain to protect these standards? Now, when I went through this process the first time, when I put this together, the biggest breakthrough I had was that I found it was sleep. Sleep was my one thing, and something that I just had not even thought about aligning with my productivity or finding fulfillment in my life. But when I raised my standards in terms of my sleep, when I put it up the rank in terms of commitment and the discipline and the structure to make sleep priority, not only did I feel better, but my business performance, my fitness, my relationships all improved dramatically. And this is where I see most high achievers failing, is that firstly, they don't have the clarity over where they need to focus their time and energy. And then secondly, when they do identify it, they actually lack the discipline, the internal structure to maintain these standards. And this is precisely why I created the Discipline Mastery Bootcamp, right? This is your first step towards breaking free of the success trap, like the opportunity to feel fulfilled, not just successful. Because the bootcamp builds the discipline, it builds the clarity, the internal structure you need to close that 40% gap in every area of your life. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, check out the link that I've put in the show notes below. What we fear doing most is usually what we most need to do. Tim Ferriss. The sad thing is that most men die in the dangerous middle. They're successful enough to be comfortable, but too afraid to pursue their highest standard. And the fear isn't failure, it's abandoning the comfort you've built. Because elite performance isn't about doing more, it's about structured discipline across every domain. And when you reject comfort and you demand your highest standard across all domains, success isn't just something you achieve, right? It's something you start to feel every single day. And I've seen this firsthand, like this is what I train. And inside Rising Kings, like we just don't talk about this type of transformation. Like we're building it, we're tracking it, we're demanding it, because men don't grow alone. And true fulfillment doesn't come from comfort. It comes from disciplined excellence. And so to close out, I want you to remember this. The most dangerous place to be is comfortable. The safest place is structured discipline, driving your highest standard. And if you want the practical step-by-step system on how to make that a reality, watch this video right now.